Read.
Alright, cool. Prima facie duties that we have to follow based on particular circumstances are preferable to absolute duties. 2 reasons. First, monistic moral theories fail means we should reject absolute duties in favor of prima facie duties. This is on your 6. Monistic theories were overly reductive. We generally take more into account than just pleasing consequences of promises. Must be weighed to keep both in mind. The way to find all relevant considerations is by looking at relationships, because varying relationships as well as varying situations, although we can truly rely on our intuitions. Theories resting on absolute duties filter respect relationships. People are not just in a beneficiary relationship, but also those of parent, friend, employee, etc. Duties that we have to these people are not absolute because they're not always relevant. And change their stringency. Ross's answer is prima facie duties in most situations. We have the duty to keep our promises unless some other duty tells us otherwise. And second, reflective equilibrium. Reflective equilibrium is a beneficial approach to moral questions. 2 warrants. Daniel 79. Background theories from a theory, the person, general social theory, and the role of morality in society. Level 3 theories, principles shows that level 2 must match or consider moral judgments and reflective equilibrium and yield a feasible, stable, well-ordered society. Wide equilibrium can benefit moral inquiry. First, philosophers have suggested many apparently moral disagreements rest on non-moral disagreements. Wide equilibrium may reveal more systematic structures, sources of agreement. Second, philosophers have not helped us understand what factors constrain considerations people choose as relevant and more reasoning, and likely suggestions that these features depend on underlying level 3 theories, level 2 principle selectors, and adequate moral psychology would have to incorporate wide equilibrium as in science. Judgments about possibility various claims are result of the interconnected theories already found acceptable, and reflective equilibrium justifies upholding prima facie duties. It's on your 6. The procedure the pluralist uses is reflective equilibrium. Reflective equilibrium to which he appeals is not just adjusting moral principles to intuitions, but it's wide appealing to non-evaluated facts and valuations displayed in personal relationships. The pluralist account rests on initial credence to reflectively interpret intuitions or principles and increase credence when subject to reflective improvement. With this procedure in place, there's no need for the pluralist to have a first principle. Ross uses this process to discover prima facie duties. He uses reflection to look at the relationships we have with other people, and then reflective equilibrium to see which duties, because of these relationships, are the most fundamental, and this justifies principlism. Principlism is pluralistic and requires weighing prima facie duties of respect for autonomy, beneficence, non-maleficence, and justice. High no date. An act X is morally right. If X is the action, though, be selected by one is probabilly balanced. Respect for autonomy, non-maleficence, beneficence, and justice. Both Chamachachas say Ross's distinction between prima facie natural obligations informs our analysis, and prima facie obligation is binding unless a competing moral obligation outweighs it in a particular circumstance. Actions have several qualities. Whether an action really is right is determined by the entire nature of the action, not just one characteristic. Given this notion, essential to Ross's theory of right action principlism is likewise a theory of right action. Thus, the standard is consistency with principlism. I contend that presumed consent for organ procurement from the deceased respects our prima facie duties under principlism, and I defend an opt-out system. Saunders 10. Opt-out donations frequently called presumed consent. This complains a practical policy with one specific justification for it, while any system that presumes consent whenever a patient's wishes are known exacerbates the danger of using organs without consent. This is only problematic if we accept the premise that we need someone's actual consent before we can use the organs. A more successful strategy for justifying opt-out may do away with the presumption, arguing that actual consent is unnecessary. A. Beneficence. Presumed consent is key to beneficence, which turns utile and contributes to an increase in organ donation. Wellborn 14. Regression analysis comparing donation to 22 countries over 10 years reported the countries operating presumed consent had donation rates 25 to 30% higher after taking into account health expenditure, religious beliefs, and legislative systems. A systematic review concluded the relative contribution of this change compared with other changes in education and infrastructure was not clear. However, the analysis would lead us to believe that at least some increase would occur purely as a result of presumed consent, making it compatible with beneficence. Beneficence is at the heart of utile, and Belgium and Austria approved Gundel 4. After Belgium passed presumed consent, donation rates rose dramatically. Frequently cited examples, 2 similar transplant centers in Belgium, Leuven and Antwerp. Leuven switched to presumed consent and its donation rate climbed to 40 donors per million, while Antwerp did not change policy and only maintained previous levels. In Austria, donation quadrupled, and posthumous organ donation saves lives with a minimal burden to donors. If falls, we should require it as a form of beneficence. Saunders 10. If it is wrong to refuse consent, then we may be permitted to take the organs, although they have not actually consented. We need not presume whether someone would have consented. We are entitled to treat them as if they had. When we can prevent something bad, such as a death, without sacrificing anything of comparable moral importance, we have to do so. Organ donation saves and improves lives. The burden demanded to small people's organs are of little use after death and cost posthumous removal less than those faced by a living donor. And the principle that we should prevent something bad of doing so is at minimal cost to ourselves is justified under any moral theory. Singer 72. Suffering, death, and lack of food, shelter, and medical care are bad. Most people will agree if it is in our power to prevent something bad from happening without sacrificing anything of comparable moral importance, we ought morally to do it. If I'm walking past a pond and see a child drowning, I ought to pull the child. That doesn't mean getting my clothes muddy. This is insignificant. Why I'm inclined towards utile was my aim to produce an argument which would appeal to anyone who accepted the initial premise. These authors view that we are morally entitled to give greater weight to our own interests simply because they are our own, seems contrary to the idea widely shared by philosophers that partiality, universalized abilities inherent in the very notion of moral judgment. B. Autonomy, presumed consent would respect the wishes of most people. Wellborn 14. If individuals are not on the register under the current system, their wishes may not be fulfilled. 70% of the UK population on the organ donor register, so based on reports, 90% support organ donation. Up to 30% of individuals who would wish to donate to have the wishes granted. There is potential for the 10% against the donation not to have the wishes met if their families unknowingly consent to donation. Presumed consent would go against the wishes of 10% at most. And for further respect for wishes model to the interference model of autonomy, this justifies presumed consent. Wellborn 14. The interference model can't be applied because doing nothing with the body after death is not practical, and we should act under the respect for wishes model. Using this model, both the mistaken removal and non-removal over equal ethical significance, it follows the most ethical consensus of organ donation goes against the wishes of the fewest number of people, which is the system of presumed consent. See non-maleficence, principle non-maleficence justifies presumed consent. Wellborn 14. Non-maleficence should be applied to potential donors who relatives time cannot be down someone after they dead failure utilize viable organs which could potentially be life-saving. Doesn't mean harm to thousands who need to die for lack of organ transplants. I'm here. The doctors may not make all efforts to save a patient's life. Reassurance that doctors looking after such patients would continue to make every possible effort, and there are 2 different teams involved in these situations. The intensive care team and transplant team may alleviate these concerns. D. Justice. Presumed consent is key to justice, ensures equal opportunities for patients needing organs well-born for teen. Shortage of donors means that all patients who require a transplant have an equal opportunity to receive a donor organ, and any measure likely to increase the supply of organs is therefore congruent with justice, which requires equal opportunities for all. However, it must be ensured that all who object to organ donation have the opportunity to register the wishes under presumed consent. Under view, xenotransplantation is on the rise now. New scientific breakthrough proves Schaefer 21. 3,000 people in the U.S. on the waiting list for our transplant. Dr. Peden thinks xenotransplantation provides a viable solution, and a study led by Moheen piglets were genetically engineered to grow hearts later transplanted in baboons. This is potential for paving the way for use of animal organs for transplantation into humans, and organ shortages is the root cause of xenotransplantation. Presumed consent solves lines 97. Companies that claim to pick organs the only way to meet demand for organ transplants, likely waiting list for organs. That's the reason for xenotransplantation in the first place. However, there's huge scope for improving supply for human organs. Options such as presumed consent have been employed in countries with success. In Belgium, presumed consent system, double donors and transplants, and xenotransplantation causes extinction. New viruses will be created and will spill over Somerville 10. Xenotransplantation creates a real possibility of wiping out the human race. When we transplant from animal to human, a very powerful reaction occurs to overcome the science to modify the genome pigs. These genes strictly restore the immune system to overcome the reaction that poses a risk not only to recipients, sexual partners, and families, but the public as a whole. Such concerns have been raised by eminent scientists. Other concerns include pig retroviruses being introduced in the human population with sequences of biogenic, combining biogenic human genome to form a totally new virus. Humans develop serious illnesses, pigs are immune to this case, HIV and some primates, and debate on effective implementation is a moral responsibility. Topic L3. A thorough discussion must include costs foregoing such studies. 16 patients died waiting for an organ. Policymakers prohibit the programs, then they must bear some moral responsibility for the patients died. Therefore, a better informed debate is necessary that can only occur after effectiveness of incentive models has been measured. Cross-X.
Everyone good?
Yeah.
How do we know if something is consistent with our intuitions?
We look at what our intuitions are, and then
how do we know what my intuitions are?
We reflect upon what we think is intuitively right or wrong. Seems kind of easy.
So how do we know? How can we weigh between the contention level arguments and the AF then?
We weigh the stringency of the duties based upon the multifaceted nature of our personal relationships. For example, the duty of do no harm is quite central to medical ethics. We would have to weigh the stringency.
Sure, but where does the AF exemplify and explain what harm is? It seems like you just say it's intuitive, but my question is, like, your Singer evidence says that if it's a small cost to us, we should do something good. So where do you establish what the good is? And
well,
how do we
the
weigh
contention level debate would be about what constitutes a small harm or a large harm to the donor.
Okay, so your framework that says that some things are just true are only true in context of the contention level arguments?
Well, we'd have a contention level debate over what's true under my standard. That's kind of obvious.
Wait, so it seems like we weigh what's true under your standard just based on what your contention level arguments say? What is your framework? How do we know what's good under intuitions?
We would have to show that we are consistent with the following 4 principles that I have established, which are widely accepted in the medical profession and also consistent with a wide variety of cultural and religious
so your Singer evidence says that we should not do something bad, or we should do something good if it's a small cost to us. So my question is, what does it mean to do something good? This talks about saving lives, but
the Singer 72 evidence says that suffering and death are pretty bad. Most people would agree. If we can prevent someone from dying at little cost to ourselves, we should clearly do that. And that would especially be true under most moral theories that value impartiality or universalizability.
Let's talk about
since we shouldn't just prioritize our own self-interest.
Let's talk about the autonomy argument.
Sure.
What is autonomy?
Autonomy.
How do we respect it, rather?
We respect the wishes of most people. The Wellborn 14 evidence defends the respect for wishes model of autonomy.
So why is it true that if the majority say that they might want this, that we should just do it for everyone? How does that respect the autonomy of the 30?
If the respect for wishes model is true, that means that mistaken removal of organs and mistaken non-removal of organs are morally equivalent, which means that we should try to minimize mistakes.
Okay, so once again, how does that respect the autonomy of the 30% who disagree?
Because given that mistaken removal and mistaken non-removal are morally equivalent, we have good odds of respecting the person's wishes.
Is autonomy like empowerment? Why is it true?
I don't know what that means.
Why is it true that just doing what someone might do respects their autonomy?
Because the Wellborn 14 evidence says that the alternative is the interference model, which cannot be applied in the medical profession because it's impossible to not interfere with a person's body during treatment.
Okay, let's talk about your justice argument. Why is it true that justice is just equal opportunities? Why can't it be other things?
Who's going to say that justice is not fairness? That's pretty intuitive.
Sure, I understand, but why is it true that it's just solely equal opportunities? Like, how do we know that that's the most intuitive approach?
You could provide an alternative conception of justice and weigh that against mine, but I will defend...
How do we weigh? How do we weigh against the intuitions of just 2 things that are just true about justice?
You would
what
make
if
the
I
argument.
think justice is like not marginalizing people, and you think justice is just everyone having opportunity?
Presumed consent doesn't marginalize people either,
but
which is why Chris and Fink should vote for presumed consent because it's a great idea.
Alright, we're doing 5 minutes of prep, right?
Presumed consent's consistent with all of our intuitions.
Yeah. Okay. cheese prep. 3:20 left. And I'll flash it to you. Give me a second.
Cool.
It'll be 1 off AC. It's called AT Tomasi. Just follow along in the doc. I'll say if I skip something.
Sounds good. AT Tomasi.
Okay. All good?
Indeed.
First off, K, the notion of presumed consent that individuals have to go through a bureaucratic process to reclaim what's rightfully theirs highlights the state ownership and commodification of bodies as items in a pawn shop void of agency. Warner. The philosophy underlying the drive to impose organization by presumed consent that the state has the ownership of our bodies. The notion that we should have to go through a bureaucratic process to redeem them from the state like an item in a pawn shop is repugnant to the autonomy and dignity of human beings. The state which owns its citizens' bodily organs is a slave state. Presumed consent is not the magical solution. Presumed consent would be the ultimate victory for totalitarians. Acknowledgement that they own us down to the last sinew and tissue must be rejected straight turns. The 1AC autonomy argument because my autonomy is an issue of empowerment. The default assumption to say that they can just own people's bodies probably bad. And this commodification of the body is incredibly reductionist and devalues human dignity, excluding others from the conception of humanity. Furthermore, this approach otherwise support individuals and exploits them for the use of the wealthy. It's the capitalist machine at its finest. Shepherd. The problem with markets is that they reduce human beings to the status of commodities that can be bought and sold in the organ market. The cost of integrity of the body is given way to ideas of divisible body detachable organs as commodities. The new field of bioethics is largely capitulated to the dominant market equals the transformation of a person to a life that must be prolonged at any cost as they like. The ultimate commodity that is just as hardly fitting to the discussions because bioethical standards have been finally calibrated to match things to the desires of the consumers. Cut the card there. And explicit consent is the alternative. It rejects commodification because it allows each person to get the autonomous conclusion about what to do with their body by themselves. This is why presumed consent can never be virtuous. It's a question of means, not ends. Boyce. There's a need to establish an ethical framework around the good that functions particularly to achieve wide acceptance and enactment of organ donation as a virtuous act. The idea that a just man engaged in positive behaviors action through inclination rather than through legislation is central. Voluntary acts of community benefit are preferable to psychological state arise from the imposition by the law. Those free to rational conclusion by simply realizing the wisdom of specific action may be more inclined to realize the good of specific situations. Cut the card there. And only accepting the intrinsic value of each human being can we see this to stop the commodified logic that places we should look at people as more than the sum of their parts. Weiss. By conceiving of life as a home form of life intended in a sense of who or what we are, we must see that life in terms of lived body, which at the same time both life and that cannot be abstracted from the body, by which it lives life is necessarily lived out in the body, kind of navigation, understanding possibilities, which are meaningful in life. We cannot merely look for the cessation of functions from organ like the heart and lungs instead. We have to see how the whole form of life and living is affected. The role of the ballot is to vote for the debater that best tears down oppressive power structures. An oppressive power structure is one that excludes the status of moral agents and treats them as less than such. McLaurin. This social field is always open. We must explore power relations have unintended consequences which define deep structural aspects of oppression. Domination operates to overturn structures. This is domination means a recognition that ideology is not just an epistemological preserve of the way in which discursive systems generate particular social relations as well as reflect. We need to ask how our identities bound up with historical forms of discursive practices directly interact with the Daniels evidence. You say this second warrant is literally that reflective equilibrium depends on other underlying ethical theories. Only I'm justifying what those underlying ethical theories are. My arguments that we need to break down oppressive power structures so that everyone has a chance of having their voice heard. And K outweighs case. We perceive a commodification as just intuitively wrong with straight turns. All your intuition arguments because everyone knows that it's bad because we all want to be seen as moral agents. Shrekker. For people to be commodified given the ways that human norms work, it's far more reasonable to think that they will not treat each other accordingly. People's thoughts and feelings about both themselves and others may thus remain significantly different. Yeah, people will still be commodified. Concerns about commodification, objectification strike an intuitive or even severe emotional core. That always outweighs because it will never because it's just true. While all these other principles can be compromised in terms of conflict, this is never compromised. We always think it's bad. And off beneficence, first. Turn your arguments from beneficence to identify the body as a fragmented resource that is intrinsically valuable. The app frames all other options as irrational, making a gift of life impossible tonight. Its idea of minimal self-sacrifice that establishes and conceals the resourcification, commodification of the body. London. The body being looked upon to give the underlying perspective from the side of states in the medical establishment. It seems that the body shall be understood as a resource. The reason shift to presume consent regarding organ donation is a clear sign. Giving away someone's organ when one does not need them anymore is increasingly framed by states as a gift. One cannot refuse to give frame this matter. The refusal to donate becomes viewed as irrational. As a consequence, all citizens' willingness to donate the gift of life or organ donation can be presumed. The view of organ donation as gift one cannot refuse. Resourcifies the body. Also links to the decay. And turn. You make it even worse because the family refusals and empiric slow my ways also straight turns your autonomy argument since it's obvious that people clearly don't want to want to donate, because there's backlash. Dominguez and Rojas in 2013. The mean donation rate before presumed consent was 8.3, but after presumed consent was 5.95, which represents a 29% decrease. Family views will fluctuate between 32 and 41%. And the methodologies of long-term study in one place over 10 years. You should refer this to studies in the app because A, bias. Meta-studies are problematic because they overgeneralize and promote bias because the authors can just cherry-pick the best studies. There's not an equal distribution of studies. 2, overgeneralization. No matter how much you control, there's still geographical differences that influence how certain countries implement presumed consent. It's always net preferable to just look at a regressive study in one area and err my way on this issue because your Gundel study is actually citing another study that you don't have methodology for. And turn, presumed consent kills a live donation of kidneys. Barclay. Nations with presumed consent have lower rates of live donation. The study goal was to compare characteristic rates of kidney transplantation. Nations with presumed consent have lower living donation rates, and live kidney donation is key to long-term health outcomes. Needs outweighs the alpha on longevity because just because you put organs in people does not mean that those people are going to actually live longer, which is what your Singer evidence talks about. We have to promote lives. UT Southwestern 2014. Living kidney donor kidney transplantation long-term results are significantly better than deceased or donor transplant. Limited in the risk of patient death. Living donation provides a better allograft when patients survive with the deceased transplantation. Cut the card there. Off autonomy. Turn, presumed consent takes away the liberation of the oppressed to proactively concede to something. It's a question of our default assumption. Presumed consent laws encourage silence as the mode of communication. Just because you think that you might be consistent, so this directly also bites at the case because just because you think that you are consistent with the majority means you'll always ignore the minority. Jacobs. If a presumed consent policy applied to post-mortem or removal, there might be a lack of voluntary responses. Disempowers people, rendering them passive in the face of social change. Refuse consent by marginal patients to poor women of color, often reduced to an individual opposition of self-defense as an irrational expression of anger. Opting out, presumed consent might be regarded as unreasonable. So this always outweighs because the principle of diminishing marginal utility. Those people, the 30% that he's talking about, are the ones who need empowerment the most. So my argument is that we should give them a voice. Off non-maleficence. First, no uniqueness, voluntary donation also adopts a non-maleficence approach because doctors have zero incentive to stop saving your person's lives. Your evidence is at best just defensive by saying that doctors are one who just kill people. And off justice. First, turn, presumed consent is the extension of the rapacious need for organs. Actually, skip that card. Presumed consent makes claims of increase in organ donation for everyone, but that doesn't address the structural causes, which means there's always going to be an inequality terminal defense on the app. Jacobs. Organ transplantation, sophisticated and expensive procedures, performance involves many conflicts with recipients. These factors limit access to organ transplantation for the poor and minority groups. And don't believe the claims the system of opting out to facade that led us to generate legitimacy for the policy also turns case because minorities have an unequal opportunity to opt out. Jacobs. Opting out is illusory. A great number will not know how to register consent because they are not aware that they have or do not know how to. For example, the U.S. survey conducted by Goodwin revealed that only 5% were aware that the state of enacted presumed consent laws also in jurisdiction with the laws implemented objection to organ donation often requires complex procedures. People who have uncertain status, veterans or criminal records, and people who find it intimidating to dissent find themselves in a compromised position. And also turns the autonomy arguments in the app because even though 70% of people might want to donate their organs, that also ignores the opinion of the 30%, which just recreates the idea that they're a permanent underclass of citizens.
Okay. You tag your impact evidence on human dignity, HUMYN. Is there any particular reason for that choice of language?
Yeah, there is. I think that human is gendered.
So your Boyce 13 evidence is referring to a just man. So if we care about rejecting gendered language, shouldn't we reject your alt card?
No.
Why?
Because the idea is that, like, we should just spell human with a Y.
Boyce 13 is really patriarchal. He says just man. Shouldn't we reject your alternative?
No, because Boyce is just talking about the idea that, like, people should just do this.
Okay, so what is commodification?
So my argument is that commodification is the idea of having a reductionist approach to human life.
What does that mean?
Sure, so you, like, don't view people as agents intrinsic of themselves who have control over their bodies. You just view them as a sum of organs. That's really problematic because it undermines the idea that they are moral agents.
Wait, so it's unintuitive in the medical profession to view people as a sum of organs?
My argument is that commodification is always counterintuitive.
Wait, so
because we want to view ourselves as moral agents.
So
we believe that we are citizens.
So commodification is just fancy rhetoric for violating human dignity?
It's not fancy rhetoric, Adam. It's a true argument. The argument is that we need to be seen as more than the sum of our body parts. We have moral agency. We need to be able to act.
What does it mean for the state to control our bodies?
So the link evidence is really specific on this issue. It says that in a system of presumed consent, it's like a pawn shop. You feel the need to get your organs back from the state.
Don't the police control our bodies?
No, not in the same way presumed consent does.
Don't laws control our bodies?
It's a different type of control.
Aren't our bodies controlled when the state tells us what to do, where to go?
No, because my argument is that presumed consent is a particularly insidious form of control over our bodies.
Wait, but why is it...
Because it's literally your body. They have your organs inside them.
But why is it unintuitive for the state to control your body? The state controls your body all the time in many intuitive ways.
Counterintuition comes from the idea of commodification, which outweighs your case. The idea is that everyone wants to be seen as a moral agent. I want to be seen as a moral agent who can make my own decisions. That's counterintuitive if you deny that.
So you say that rejecting commodification is a duty that can never be overridden, but you've conceded that prima facie duties are preferable to absolute duties. So wouldn't we be able to? Wouldn't I be able to weigh my contention level against commodification?
It's just a weighing argument. The argument is that this evidence indicates that everyone thinks that this is bad in all circumstances.
But what's the warrant for why rejecting commodification can never be overridden, given that you've conceded that only prima facie duties are real world, not absolute duties?
No, my argument is that the reason why everyone thinks it's bad, it's just an intuition claim.
Also, does your alternative account for a plurality of principles? Because the conceded dissonor 6 evidence says that monistic approaches to morality are not real world.
It's not a monistic approach.
Clearly, rejecting commodification is not the only moral duty that we have. What other moral duties does your alternative recognize? Does your alternative recognize the duty of non-maleficence? Does it recognize the duty of beneficence? Does it recognize justice?
There's terms to the F about why you don't recognize those duties, and why those duties also link to the K, which is the overview arguments on all these
But do you concede that those duties are morally relevant? Like, is beneficence good? Is justice good? Is non-maleficence good?
Commodification is probably more counterintuitive than all those other arguments.
I'll take prep.
Okay.
What's the status of the alternative?
Unconditional. Stick with it.
Okay, 333. I'll flash you the 1AR answers.
Okay.
The card I'm actually starting the 1AR with is at the bottom of this file, but no particular reason.
Just move it to the top.
Okay.
It's not that hard.
Started from the bottom. Now I copy and pasted it here.
Oh my god. Veto.
Okay, so underview, then the critique. Actually, underview beneficence, then the critique. Is everybody ready?
No, give me a second. What's it called?
1AR VRG. Is everyone ready? GG, I have a conceded extinction scenario. You conceded that the plant solves extinction from xenotransplantation at Somerville 10, and this scenario is quite possibly the most true extinction scenario in debate. My author is optimistic that extinction won't happen, but that if it does, it'll be due to xeno means the best possible conservative estimate goes at Somerville 10. Being an incurable optimist, I do not believe the human race will end, but if it were to, it would most likely come about through avant-garde technoscience, as could happen with xenotransplantation. This is the strongest possibility that we will all die ever, which definitely outweighs all the impacts of the critique on strength of link, and extinction also precludes the alternative. This also justifies perm do both, because you cannot do the alternative if you're dead from xenotransplantation now. Beneficence, she has conceded that the planet leads to an increase in organ donation supply. That's 114. Also, this takes out her backlash argument. If presumed consent did empirically lead to an increase in organ donation supply, that proves that backlash would not have actually happened. Also, the Dominguez and Rojas 13 evidence is specific to Brazil, but in Brazil there was a general distrust of the medical profession, which means that this backlash argument is non-unique. Also, she's conceded that beneficence comes first under any moral theory. That's Singer 72. This also outweighs base her commodification arguments, because the reason why we find commodification unintuitive is because the reason why commodification happens is because you have selfish people that commodify others for their own goals, but Singer evidence said that based on the intuition that we should be impartial and not prioritize our self-interest for their own sake, that we have an obligation of beneficence, that we should try to prevent bad things like suffering and death at minimal cost to ourselves. That is intuitive and comes first and outweighs commodification. That also justifies perm to both. Now the critique. Group it. 1. This critique is an unfalsifiable conspiracy theory. Hibbett and Taylor 7. Shepard Hughes has characterized transplantation as transformation by a person into a life that must be prolonged at any cost, which has made life into the ultimate commodity fetish. She argued that the waiting list was a myth. Her view is utterly at odds with conventional understandings of transplantation, as with any unfalsifiable conspiracy theory. Widespread rejection of her thesis among transplant professionals and medical ethicists serves to prove how entrenched this delusion has become. 2. Gigi again. Perm do both. Shepard Hughes, which is her impact author, actually supports presumed consent. All of the evidence in the critique is about why living donation is bad. MAW 12. Shepard Hughes has argued for presumed consent. Patients are cared for at all stages of life in countries where PC works. Shepard Hughes has said, how else can you ask people to be generous with their bodies at death? Also, her evidence for why living donation, for why presumed consent decreases living donation is a reason to prefer the perm. All of the evidence that she's reading is about why living donation is bad in the context of people buying and selling organs, or in the context of living donors being exploited and commodified because their bodies are treated as being less than human. But Shepard Hughes, who is her impact author, says commodification is bad, but also says presumed consent is good, which clearly means that you should be skeptical of any of the possible link arguments, and that also justifies perm to both, because her UT evidence says that presumed consent decreases living organ donation. This means that on a post-fiat level, presumed consent is actually a good thing. On the link evidence about the gift of life, empirics prove gift of life does not cause a master-slave relationship and ignores the complexity of human relationships. Hibbett and Taylor 7. It is unjustified to hold that giving the gift of life is only imbued with psychological indenture and resentment, and approach more receptive to complexity of moral lives paints a picture of relationships more diverse than master and slave. The anthropologist who coined the term tyranny of the gift emphasized this diversity. More than 50 studies of living donors demonstrated either no change or a positive improvement in psychological health of the vast majority, and she concedes that the Saudi 6 evidence that we have to look to the multifaceted nature of personal relationships. The alternative oversimplifies those personal relationships and justifies perm do both, and presumed consent challenges the notion of the gift of life. That also justifies perm do both. Newton 8. Changing to opt-out changes organization from giving to taking to the gift of life. We've been urged when we change presumption to assume consent, we remove that charitable impetus, leads to a shift in the recipient from being grateful to asserting a right to the organs of the dead. Also, she conceded the evidence from the bottom of the AC that you have a moral obligation to evaluate the implementation and processes of organ donation. This proves that a policy focus is the better role to balance for the round. This also co-opts her role to balance, since we can focus on historic identities and oppressive structures within a post-fiat lens. Also, criticism must be tied with political advocacy and clean one. Elaborate theoretical remedies are centered when left to adopt spectral approach to problems. Critics might put their talents better use if they bury their citizens and forge political possibilities, making attempts to understand institutions by keeping us from being slapped down in debates by true policy pros who actually know what they are talking about and not found reason to listen to jargon-ridden lectures. And even if she has turns on non-maleficence and justice, beneficence outweighs both of those. Commodification would also outweigh those other contention level arguments too, and presumed consent solves commodification by decreasing living donors.
Okay. I had 3:20 left. Did you read everything in here?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you write out a perm text for all the permutations?
Sure.
Oh, I thought that was... Is that my flow?
Yeah.
No!
Here's the perm text.
Okay. Thanks. Okay. It'll go overview, roll the ballot, KAC.
Okay.
Is everyone good? All win that there's links to the K. The roll of the ballot comes first. There's also links that too many links that you are conceding. The 1AC that outweigh all your options. The roll of the ballot comes first. You are mishandling it. The McLaurin evidence is excellent on this issue. It indicates that the roll of the ballot is worth debating the best based on oppressive power structures, which means that you need to empower minorities first who are excluded by those oppressive power structures. You conceded that the link from the Daniels evidence, which says that all of your arguments in the 1AC, your Daniels evidence says depend on an underlying ethical principle. I'm the only one justifying what that underlying ethical principle is, which means that we need to break down those power structures. Your only argument is that a policy focus is important, but plot twist, I defend a policy focus. That's in the app. It's not just a policy focus. We need to do a combination of both. We need to change our representation, but also do policy actions, which means that your McLean evidence does not interact with the roll of the ballot, which means that if I win, that you increase power structures by commodifying bias and denying them the opportunity to realize their moral agency and make them excluded from society. You vote nay. On the top of the K, off the link evidence first. The notion of presumed consent is that individuals have to go through the bureaucratic process to reclaim what's rightfully theirs because the state justifies a default whereby they have control over people's bodies. That's the Warner evidence. Takes out your argument about why it's just a conspiracy theory. Your argument is just that people disagree with my author. That's just a link to the K because it means that we need to do what's against the norm right now, because the norm right now is that this stuff is crazy, but we should do it because you're devaluing human dignity, which means that you just reinforce the norm. Also, your argument about why the gift of life doesn't equate to the slave is just an argument about why some people didn't feel that bad about presumed consent, but that does not address the specificity of my argument. My argument is that you create a pawnbroker relationship whereby people feel like they need to get their bodies back from the state. And the Shepard evidence explains why that modifies individuals because it's a reductionist approach to it devalues them to just the sum of their organs, which is really problematic. You say Shepard and Hughes says that presumed consent might happen, but A, there's a lot of different link authors in the card, but two, the Shepard and Hughes evidence is just impact evidence that talks about why commodification of people is probably really bad, and extend the argument about why that outweighs your case. That's the Schrecker evidence that outweighs case because everyone thinks that commodification is intuitively bad. You said that we can't have an absolute approach, but that's not what the K does. My argument is just that it's just true. Most people think that this is bad and that it doesn't trade off with other things. Off the alternative, your argument is Perm do both. A, no, you can't because I defend a voluntary system of donation. Can't defend a voluntary system of donation and a system of presumed concession. Two, your all evidence is just why. So I already took out the Shepard and Hughes evidence about why she says that presumed consent might work, but presumed consent does not challenge the notion of the gift of life because if my link evidence is true, then it means it just commodifies individuals with no ability to opt out. So also extend the Weiss evidence. This is a question of your representation. The all is two-pronged. Not only do we have to have a system of explicit consent, but we also have to adjust our representation. We have to view people as more than the sum of the organs, which means I'll always garner uniqueness on all the arguments, and the perm does not make any sense. Just because you say the words do both and write it on a sheet of paper does not mean that you can actually do both. You can't sever from the representations that you introduced in the app. Go to the affirmative. First, off the beneficence argument, You conceded, you're mishandling the turnabout why presumed consent increases, family refusal, that's a Dominguez, and Rojas evidence, you conceded the reasons to prefer a smaller study extended. First of all, the study is over 10 years, so it's a regressive study that analyzes the effects of one area, extend the argument by meta studies are always biased since they this is the reason to prefer the study. They're always overgeneralized and promote bad norms because authors can just cherry pick studies, but also, no matter how much you control, there's still geographic differences between different areas. So you should always look at it in one place, and it means that it specifically said it decreased donation by over 30%. And also, go to the London evidence at the top. This is specifically a link to the K. You identified the body as a resource because you make it irrational for people who do not feel like that they should give an organ. You say that the 30% is always subordinate to the 70%, which is the reason why they are always commodified for the majority. You consider the reason why that outweighs all your offense, which is the idea of diminishing marginal utility, which means that we should always liberate the poor and the people who are most oppressed by these power structures because those privileged already, it wouldn't do much for them. And also, go to the Singer evidence. Extend the argument I made in my last speech. Singer just says that we should prevent something bad if it's a small cost to us, but Singer doesn't actually identify what the bad thing would be. Only the K and the McLaurin evidence contextualize the power relations is what the bad thing is that we have to prevent. And go to the autonomy argument first. Extending Jacob's evidence about why presumed consent takes away the liberation of the oppressed to proactively concede to something, and presumed consent encourages silence as a mode of communication. Only asking for consent solves, and opting out doesn't solve because it makes it really difficult for minorities to opt out, which means that you permanently force minorities to give their bodies to the state, and you view minorities as less, and all their abilities to opt out become viewed as irrational, which is really problematic. And also, use and off the justice arguments, extend the Jacobs evidence about why it makes it really difficult for these individuals to opt. Makes it really difficult for these individuals to opt out, which means that minorities will always have an unequal opportunity to opt out. Which extend the weighing that I made in my last speech about why diminishing marginal utility means we need to care about minorities first. So the round breaks down really simply. You're mishandling the role of the ballot. The role of the ballot says that we specifically need to break down oppressive power structures, which means if I'm winning links to the K about why you recreate those oppressive power structures, it's a reason to vote for me. Which means that you can vote for me off the K link, which is the Warner evidence, and the impact evidence, which also outweighs the arguments in the F. And also this turns on the 1AC, which is the beneficence argument about why you view bodies as resources, which always commodifies them, and then the autonomy arguments about why you always deny autonomy of the poor, who it makes it really difficult for them to opt out.
Okay, so the order is Xenotransplantation, then Beneficence, and then it will be the critique. Sounds good? The extinction scenario was again not answered. She also conceded that this is quite possibly the most true extinction scenario that has ever been introduced in debate. That is the Somerville 10 evidence that the best possible conservative estimates go out. This means that there is the greatest possible chance ever that we are all going to die if you vote negative. She also concedes that extinction outweighs any other impact in the round because it would be impossible to do the alternative if we are all dead. I will concede that commodification outweighs the other principles that I have introduced in the app, but the top layer of the debate is extinction. The next layer is commodification, and those are the only two layers that matter, and I'm winning under both of them. Now, on the beneficence debate, her argument about how I treat bodies as a resource and her arguments about minorities and diminishing marginal utility only matter under the autonomy, beneficence, and justice principles, but I will concede that commodification outweighs all of those, which means you would not vote on any of the diminishing marginal utility or minorities arguments if I'm winning the PC solves commodification. Also, even if the perm does not technically make sense, I have still established my presumed consent as a net beneficial policy option, which means that if you have a trade-off as to which to vote for, because clearly we cannot do both, you can only vote for one, you have to vote for presumed consent because it is the better policy option. Go on to the critique. She says that she concedes my role in the ballot of policy focus, but this means you do not vote on any of the link arguments about representations like gift of life or the argument about resources, because she's conceded the top and L3 evidence at the bottom of the AC that debating on effective implementation and processes of organ transplantation is a moral responsibility, so you have an ethical imperative to ignore a lot of her link arguments, but also you have an ethical imperative to ignore a lot of her link arguments. She also conceded the McLean Wet evidence that says that criticism must be tied to political advocacy, which means that all of her representation arguments are just floating offense unless they explicitly justify a particular policy option. She is has conceded my concession of the UT Southwestern 14 evidence that presumed consent decreases living donation. That is a good thing for commodification. All of her impact evidence is written in the context of living donation. The Shepard-Hughes evidence, which she concedes, says that Shepard-Hughes herself advocates for presumed consent. You should be highly skeptical that her link argument leads to commodification, even if she has PC-specific link evidence that says that presumed consent leads to state-controlled bodies. You should be highly skeptical that there is an internal link between state-controlled bodies and commodification, given that her own impact author about commodification agrees with presumed consent. Shepard-Hughes is writing in the context of living organ donation, which means that I have a much stronger link to commodification based upon the perspective of her own impact author. I have conceded that presumed consent leads to a decrease in living organ donation. That has a much stronger link to commodification, because nowhere is she explaining why general state-controlled bodies is going to lead to commodification. Also, extend the Hibben and Taylor 7 evidence that the critique is an unfalsifiable conspiracy theory. That the critique is an unfalsifiable conspiracy theory is based on a lot of unconventional understandings of medical ethics and organ transplantation. She says that we should go against the norm, but this is just a warrant for why we should prefer a bad argument, which doesn't make any sense. Clearly, the critique is not accepted by the majority of experts in the medical profession, which means that you should be highly skeptical that it makes any sense. Also, she's conceded the new Nate evidence that presumed consent challenges the notion of the gift of life, which means that even if you prefer representations-based offense, you vote app, because presumed consent challenges the notion of the gift of life and makes an organ donation from a giving to a taking. Her representation-based offense is that the gift of life idea is bad and that the gift of life idea leads to commodification. But my evidence says that presumed consent challenges that notion, so presumed consent is net beneficial for justice commodification. Good.